The reason why people do the scroll and why TikTok has been so successful and a lot of like shorts on Facebook or YouTube and Instagram is because I can get a quick dopamine hit in 10 seconds. Go, wow. And then I go to the next one. Wow. And if I don't like it, I'm training the system. I can't control if someone signs on the dotted line. I can control that if I have 4 conversations that lead to a signature, then I need to have 4 for every one. Or I need to have 8 emails for every 4 meetings that get me to 1 closure. That's what I can control. That is the biggest mistake happening in sales today that I've seen. In the book Unreasonable Hospitality, they talk about Michelin stars. How do you get Michelin stars? You don't focus on the things everyone else focuses on. Those are table stakes. Having a great setup, having great food, it's actually things that people don't pay attention to. Coffee, beer, tea. People are saying conferences are dying. Couldn't be further from the truth, in my opinion. I'm not there to sell products. I'm not there to sell people. I want to learn, I want to connect, and I want to find who are the smartest people in the room. When I meet you on a Zoom for half an hour, 45 minutes, you may not have all of my attention. But when I meet you for a meal and we're sitting there having a glass of wine, breakfast or lunch or dinner, and we're sitting there for 45 minutes, an hour, hour and a half, maybe 2 hours, we're really getting to know each other. Our phones are away. There's no distractions. Let's go.
Welcome to the show, brother.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Adrian. I love your show. Thanks for having me on. I've been a long-time listener. First time joining you here one-on-one.
It's funny. I think we get this question a lot, right? How did we get to do a show together? How did we get to partner, to become partners? So maybe you want to share that, how do you recall the events?
Yeah, I think one of the coolest things is like, you put yourself in a lot of positions in life. And, funny thing is many people say no to things. And so I say no to most things in life, but there's certain things I say yes to. And one of those was meeting you. We got introduced and I had always wanted to do a podcast. I enjoy putting myself out there and kind of telling the story and sharing learnings and mistakes and also opportunities. Also like diving into real estate. And so when you would put together a podcast, you've been somewhat successful. I enjoyed it, listening in. I said, hey, this podcast thing seems pretty cool. So I'm going to give it a shot. And that opened up where I was a guest on your podcast. And then I became a co-host with you. And so that was pretty cool. We met, I think, at an event here locally put on by one of our friends. I think maybe it was a couple different events we were at. Got to know each other. We just aligned and we kind of synced up and enjoy going to events together and trying new things. I think what's something that drew me to you about you is how creative you are, trying new things and testing new things. And you're very meticulous about the learnings from what you do and then shutting it off if it doesn't make sense or doesn't align with what your goals are. So that really aligned with me, being very intentional with your time and how you spend it. And then I love how inquisitive you are and curious you are about meeting the best minds on the topic, whether it's a asset manager or someone who runs $1 billion fund or someone who goes really deep on maintenance. And so there's all these areas I don't know, but I get to learn from you about and on those topics. And then I can bring in knowledge that I know about, like venture capital and startups and that kind of world and technology. And you've really resonated with it. So I just love that, how we can exchange ideas freely together. And a lot of the people we've gotten to know through our networks have, I think, added to the value of our lives, which is something I really focus on.
So speaking of your area or areas of expertise, what are some things that you're looking at in 2026?
Yeah.
And what are some predictions? What are some evolutions that you see, major shifts into those areas?
So a couple of things. What I'm known for is for Proptech. And so, the joke is, especially in this building in the community of Atlanta, they call me Mr. Proptech. And where that root comes from is that we built package lockers and our company was called Luxor One. And I'm fortunate enough to have met Arik Levy through a cold call. I cold reached out to him when he was building a laundry company through lockers back in 2009. And I was out of work, but I loved this company. I was a customer of it. And I said, this is brilliant. And I went and joined him, helped him grow that business. And then we built 2 new companies called Drop Locker and Luxor One. And that's what I became known for. So to answer your question of why I am 100% focused on real estate, multifamily, whether that's the experience of housing to the experience of hospitality and travel, but it's all around placemaking and in real life. So if you think about people I'm all in on and want to learn from in the next year are the developers, the architects. If you think of the great placemakers like Jamestown, Matt Bronfman, if you think about Toro Developments and the team here in Atlanta, if you think about Related Group and building great places, all over the country, you think about Boulevard in Las Vegas, the challenges of high competition in Vegas for that attention, and they're building this awesome space. So that's what I'm really doubling down on is the placemaking of the developers, the technologists building hardware and AI robotics. Pumped about that. I love it. To the interactions of as AI takes over a lot of our online experiences, and we can't even tell the difference sometimes, in real life is going to be even more important. We're going to yearn for being together in 2026 more than ever. And I think every year from now on, it's going to be a bigger deal to get together, for meals, to get together for coffee, to get together for events. People are saying conferences are dying. Couldn't be further from the truth, in my opinion. I think conferences are getting better. They're just getting harder for people who maybe are too focused on the technology side of the technology of connecting. And so I think the mistake is there's a balance to everything. Just like there's the balance of having great technology, you have to think about the human implementation of that technology within an organization, right? To have success. It doesn't matter how good your technology is if you can't get the people on the front end to implement it and to buy it. So there's that human piece. The same thing with events, the same thing with connection, the same thing with media is like you have to have a balance. People don't want to stare at AI all day long. That might pull them in as the hook, but they'd be like, oh gosh, you really let me down in this video, or this wasn't real. Never mind. I'm not going to follow that person anymore. So I think there's going to be a bigger need for 2026 that I'm going to double down on are going deeper on people like Andrew Huberman, the Huberman Labs, and asking the questions of what he thought, what his experiments are, and then pulling those smart people together. I'm going to double down on Diary of a CEO. Steven, I absolutely love his podcast and love his format of going deep on the lessons, going deeper on what people know, and then the lessons learned from those people, and the behind the scenes. And I align with Steven a lot because he isn't just doing that really well. He's also now getting into technology investments. And I really appreciate people who do that. Something else I'm doubling down on is Andreessen Horowitz, A16Z, one of the largest venture firms in the world, and all of their different avenues they go after. But they brought on two of my former partners and bosses at On Deck, David Booth and Eric Tornberg, to be partners. And they're now building out an entire media arm and a new arm for going early and making early bets. So those types of people who are taking the risks, who have the chops and the experience, but are now venturing into areas that predominantly people didn't think of them for, which is real estate. So real estate, technology, that's what I'm pumped on for 2026 and going deeper.
What are they seeing then other companies aren't, building this media arm?
So a couple things. I think you hit on it earlier, is that there's a want of people to go deeper, but there's also a lack of attention and time for people to go deeper sometimes. So to say it in layman's terms and make it easy is that the reason why people do the scroll and why TikTok has been so successful and a lot of like shorts on Facebook or YouTube and Instagram is because I can get a quick dopamine hit in 10 seconds, go, wow. And then I can go to the next one. Wow. And if I don't like it, I'm training the system, right? Of what I like and don't like. Whereas with long form, you're going to enjoy an element of it. And then there might be high points and low points, but you're actually going to learn something that can be useful and repetitive. And you can actually remember those stories. So I liken it to, Andrew Huberman uses this term called neuroplasticity that I'm learning all about. And our brains are trained to forget, I think it's like 98% of what comes into our brains. 98%, it's insane, some high number. And yet we're training ourselves to watch all this ridiculous, crazy AI generative content. And we're not actually retaining it. It's actually like we're just kind of like passing the day like a video game. Whereas I think the opportunity, and you've hit on this a lot, is that long form where you go deep with someone and you can listen to it while you're doing a drive, listen to it while you're doing a workout, listen to it while you're making dinner if you're by yourself. It's just like watching a movie. If you're watching a Tom Cruise Mission Impossible, you're like, wow, there was a whole story to this. And I took something away from that. You don't take much away from a 10-second, 20-second, 30-second clip, but it gets you pulled in to learn about that person's journey, to learn why, Matt Bronfman is focused on building multifamily, short-term, retail, office into one cohesive environment. Why, David Cummings is shifting from startups and building in Atlanta to now building buildings of, 50 plus properties and an ecosystem for founders to build. So that's what I think about is how do you learn about people's journeys that you can actually take away, learn something from, and then make an impact in the world. That's kind of my big journey for 2026.
Let's talk about Chris's journey. I think that, more or less, like this hasn't been like, really a public, conversation. Maybe it was.
Yeah, I've pretty much.
More or less, but I like to hear it. So where did everything started for you when it comes to business? Where did you start?
Yeah.
As an entrepreneur?
Yeah.
So how?
So entrepreneur, I think it's funny you asked that because I had forgotten about when I was a kid. So I guess my first entrepreneurship journey was even before college and even before high school. My grandfather would take me when I was a kid, 6, 7, 8 years old, to his real estate, and he would build towns in California. And so he would take pieces of land, maybe weren't very favorable, they're on hills, and he'd do topography, and he would see how well, like for instance, we go and do engineering on it. And we would see how well the water would go off the slopes. And I don't remember the exact terminology for it, but I know that he was testing the sites for ability to build homes on those pieces of property, or apartments, or retail, or a church, fire department. And he would split up those pieces of land and he would draw it out by hand. And then he would put his little markers in the ground. And it was pretty epic because putting these little markers in the ground, and then, back in the day, this is how they did it before they had lasers and all of that. But you would have a permanent marker with his number from the state of California in the ground that was marking that piece of property, and just piece by piece, by marker around the property. And he built towns all over California. He built, back in the day, he would share about how he built a Air Force base up in Alaska. So he got to do a lot of really cool things around water and land. And his journey of being an entrepreneur and an engineer, that took hold into me. He took me so my first business was when I was 8 years old. I went with my grandfather up to the hills near Lake Tahoe, California. And we would go and grab mistletoe would grow. I don't know if you know, it grows in oak trees. And we would go and we would get a ladder off the road, and we would just go grab this mistletoe hanging down and cut it. And it just came in like bunches. And mistletoe is not very pretty, by the way. It's not as pretty as like this. It looks like almost like how do you describe it? Like a weed in a tree. And you cut it down, and so this big thing, we'd throw it in black bags, and then we'd take it home. And we would buy, so mistletoe, you see in all the Christmas stuff and on holiday stuff and cheer, and you kiss people under it. And what we would do is we'd take it, cut it into little pieces, and I'd get ribbon and bells from the store, and I'd have my 5 different price points. I had my good, better, best, which is something I didn't even know at the time, but I learned it later. And I'd have probably my basic mistletoe with a piece of ribbon around it was probably $1.50. It may have even been $1.25. This is, by the way, almost 40 years ago. And then I would have my next level up with bells. That might be $1.75. And then I have my next one up with some berries. And that was $2.50. And then my next level up, which was $4.75 for everything connected. So I had these different levels, and my mom would take me to the grocery store, and I would sell mistletoe in front of the grocery store just for like 2 weeks. Maybe it was like a total of 8 days around the holidays. But I think I pulled in each year around $1,000, maybe $1,500 a year from just a few days.
That's a lot of money 40 years ago.
At 8, 9, and 10 years old.
For 8-year-old.
And so I didn't even realize, but that led to me then learning about stocks from my grandfather. And he taught me about stocks, and I would take that money and I would invest it into a company called Intel. And so Intel would then go on to Split and other things, which was a whole different learning as I was into my teens. But what was crazy is when I was 9, 10, 11, I then got into Boy Scouts. And then we started selling other stuff. And I would sell books door to door. I'd sell gift wrap door to door. I sold for band camp. I played the trumpet. And I would sell candy bars at school to make money. So if there was something to sell, I was selling it. Cords of Oakwood, I would sell in front of the grocery store. And I always wanted to be the top. I was very competitive. I played golf competitively, through high school and college. And I would always want to be the top salesperson. So I'd always just be selling nonstop. But those were my entrepreneurial journeys very early on, up until college.
You talked about selling a few times during this journey. What do sales professionals get wrong today when they're trying to sell? And I'm going to put this into a little bit more context.
Sure.
You and I both talk to a lot of companies. Some of them are friends, some of them are partners of ours, and some of them are just like random folks that we're running into at conferences. One of the most frequent, I'll say, complaints or challenges that they have is that we're not connecting with the buyers.
Yep.
It's very hard to get in front of the decision makers. So, given your successes and your background and your passion about sales, what parts are they getting wrong? What are some areas, maybe some blind spots, right, that you see in a sales process, and generally speaking, in multifamily, and some opportunities for improvement?
That's a big question. So let me try to break down one part, which is, what do most salespeople get wrong is that they try to sell instead of align. So I think the most important thing for someone to understand in any process is to, number one, align with your audience. Why are they there today? Why are you there? Why are you coming to them? And then realize that too many people are trying to create a transaction or to sell someone on something before they're even ready for it. So it's good to ask for the sale, right? It's good to ask for business, but it's also important to ask if there's even alignment and then give the opportunity to be shut down. So some people say, never take no for an answer. That was me when I was younger. Always be selling or always be closing, ABC, right? In the famous movie that I'm forgetting the name of it right now. But first prize was a Cadillac, second place was steak knives, and third place you're fired, right? With Alec Baldwin. And the mistake is trying to close every customer rather than disqualify every customer. So a big thing for me whenever I'm thinking about a partnership or working with somebody is, or if I want to spend my time, is understanding, is there even alignment here? Is this a right fit? And then does the timing work? Because if the timing doesn't work, then we can still have conversations. But if timing, budget isn't right, and then we should think about when the next step is. And I think the number one mistake I see over and over, and I still say I'm helping some sales teams and a CEO right now, and it pains me because this team is incredibly successful. But one of the challenges I see and are here, I'll say, oh, how's it going with that? They'll ask me about a company. I go, how's it going? Oh, their close lost. And they go, oh, what happened? Did they go with someone else? No, they just said they aren't the right fit because they're not the right fit because they made some assumption that was in their CRM. And I go, interesting. I didn't know that. Did they buy your competitor's product? Well, I don't know if they did, but we marked it closed. Okay. Or the person moved. Okay, interesting. They moved, but are they, oh, I see. They're not in your system anymore, or they're not meeting your timelines anymore. So therefore you close them out of your system. You didn't set the next step so that they're ready to come back when they're ready on their timeline. And so I think that there's oftentimes the wrong attributes being made on these, so much of our sales lives, our human lives have been made into AI technology, to where we're not actually stepping back and saying, we're trying to throw people into certain buckets. And do we even have the right buckets set up today? So in sales to me, too much is put on the outcome instead of a great thing I learned when at Luxor and Drop Locker, and we worked with Procter and Gamble, and we worked with Assa Abloy, incredible organizations, is we used Sandler, the Sandler rules, the Challenger sales. We used multiple systems, Salesforce, and a lot of the training behind that. And one of the mistakes people don't think about is the process, enjoying the process, because the outcome is all about the inputs, and everything can be fed back. You can't control outcome. And too many people think they can control. No, I can control if we hit our goal or not. You can't. You can't actually control that. What you can control is the process that leads to that. I can't control if someone signs on the dotted line. I can control that if I have 4 conversations that lead to a signature, then I need to have 4 for every one, or I need to have 8 emails for every 4 meetings that get me to 1 closure. That's what I can control. That is the biggest mistake happening in sales today that I've seen.
Conferences, we mentioned briefly conferences, and also lots of supplier partners.
Yeah.
We're going to conferences, and you said, some of them were saying, the conferences are dying, like they're, they're not valuable anymore. You disagree with that?
I do.
And then I wanted to know, why are you disagreeing, besides the fact that in real life becomes like more valuable through this assault of technology that has on our lives. And the question is around, how do companies do conferences wrong?
Yeah.
Because if you're disagreeing with the thesis, I'm assuming that, the assumption is there that they're not maybe having the right approach to a conference, so that they're not getting the best out of that particular conference. Where do they go wrong when it's about conferences in like preparation, approach, everything?
I think there's like 3 things there. So number one, when you're thinking about a strategy as a company of how you're going to market, you think about it from a marketing standpoint, awareness and advertising. You might be thinking of your inbounds, then you're thinking of your sales team and the team that can actually take them from lead to closure, right? And lead to lease is sometimes the term is. And then you have your onboarding team, and then your success team, et cetera. One of the mistakes that people think about for events, and the way it had been gone on for years and decades, is you went to a conference and you showed up and then you just said, I'm going to have a booth and people are going to come to my booth. And the challenge now with AI and technology is that many people will set up the booth and they'll set meetings, right? So if there's 10,000 people, let's just use round numbers. If 10,000 people come to a conference, one of the conferences I'm going to in 2 months, I'm going to be speaking at IBS, and that's going to have, I think, 100,000 people in Orlando, right? But if you think about like many of these conferences we go to, whether it's RETC's Optech, NMHC's annual meetings, if you think about NAA's annual conference, right? Specifically in the real estate world, think about RETCon and CRETEC. Let's just say, a conference has 10,000 people and you have a booth and there's 200 booths and you didn't do the work, you didn't put in the effort, or you put out messaging that was stale or didn't connect with anyone, and you expect people to come to your booth. That is one of the biggest mistakes I've seen people make, and they still do it. And that's, I think, what oftentimes to me, I learned something great from someone here in Atlanta, a great venture capitalist, who he looks at when someone says something like, why are they saying it, right? What is their bias? We all have biases. I have biases in saying this too.
It's human nature. It's in us.
Yeah. So my bias is that I believe that something like a conference, it's what works for that person. And so most conferences are not the right fit for most sales teams because they might be selling to a different audience. So for instance, if you were selling to asset managers and you go to NAA Apartmentalize, that may or may not, you're going to have fewer asset managers because you're going to have more maintenance people, right? More property managers, more people on the management side.
Operations.
Bingo. Whereas if you go to NMHC annual, that's going to be deal makers. So if you're selling maintenance, that's your wrong audience probably, because your audience there are the brokers, asset managers, acquisitions and dispositions, right? People doing deals and building developments and architects, you name it. So I always think about that first and foremost is it's not cut and dry whether a event will be successful because you're a PMS system, or you're a hardware company, or you are a new technology, right? Startup. it depends on, is your audience there? Are they receptive to you? Are they even aware of who you are? And then have you done the outreach or the work necessary to get them into the right room, whether the right room is their booth, whether the right room is a conversation on stage, whether the right room is a meal. And then too many people forget about the follow-up. So there's pre-prep, there's on-site, and then there's the post-work. And it's very, very difficult. And I've made so many mistakes on this, Adrian. I have made the mistakes of not doing enough prep work before and thinking I'll do it all on site. And then doing great follow-up. And I've also done where I've done tons of prep on site, but then we lacked on the back end. And I think what it is it's important to think about how your team and who owns what parts. So is there a certain person on your team who owns and who is phenomenal at the pre-work? And who is the best team to be on site? The mistake many people think is that, oh, I should go to the on-site because I did the pre-work, or I should be on site because I'm going to do the post-work. Those are actually very different things. So people who should be on site, oftentimes in my history and learning from other people, are oftentimes who are the people that operate best in person, who can connect really, really well, because the people who can take you through the process might actually be a very different people. Technical people might actually need to go to that conference. Especially if it's technical people, you should probably be sending your technical team rather than your sales team. That's another big mistake I see, is sending the wrong people to events, and therefore people won't have meetings with them, or they won't have resonated well with them. Also, I find the level. Sometimes you have junior salespeople trying to sell to CEOs, and that oftentimes is a disconnect. And I've met many CEOs who will tell me afterwards, like, that was interesting, but I really would love to meet the vice president of that company or the CEO before we're going to do business together. And then I'll leave you, I think another key thing that I've heard from many, many people in real estate is they do business with people who they like and they trust, right? And that's sales 101. But in real estate, because you're oftentimes making a decision for 5, 10, 15 years, you're not going to switch that software if you don't have to. I know people who bought Luxor 12 years ago and have never shifted. And they're probably never going to leave. It's not that another software could come in and be just as good. It has to be better. And the incumbent would have to mess up in a lot of times. So if you think about it, if it can be really long sales cycles in real estate, and because real estate isn't like a startup. Real estate has a tangible asset that has underlying value. Whereas many startups and companies that buy technology don't have an underlying asset that's physical, right? And that holds out value even if the company goes out of business. If a real estate business like this building goes out of business, the interior renting, the building and land still has intrinsic value to it. And it might be upwards of 50%, it might be 70% of that recurring revenue, theoretically. Could be less. But that's the idea, is that a lot of people, especially over time, in 10, 15, 20 years of holding a piece of asset, you may have zero rent coming in, and it could still be worth more than what you bought it for, which is a crazy concept. So that's why real estate takes as much longer sales cycles. The other beautiful thing I love about in real person conferences is, for the most part, most conferences are getting bigger. Some are getting smaller, some are changing, but most conferences I'm going to, who are doing it right, telling the story, showing the value to people up front, right? Great conferences. And many I attend or I go to, my goal is to help people be successful. So when I go, I actually want to help people connect the dots. That's one of my favorite things to do. But that's what I love, is that these conferences are getting bigger. You know, we'll be at the big annual conference, and there will be, I think it's 3 times the size of when I went 8 or 9 years ago. And it is the conference every broker, dealer, etc. must go to if you're in that business. If you're not there, people are like, where are you? So there's certain events that have just become incredible. And I think there's something to be said about, when I meet you on a Zoom for half an hour, 45 minutes, you may not have all of my attention. But when I meet you for a meal and we're sitting there having a glass of wine, breakfast or lunch or dinner, and we're sitting there for 45 minutes, an hour, hour and a half, maybe 2 hours, we're really getting to know each other. Our phones are away. There's no distractions. We are having conversations about family and what we're working on and what you're doing. And that is entirely different than just the other 8 calls on my to-do list today. right? The other 40 emails that I'm trying to get to while I'm talking to you on a Zoom call. So being in person when the phone's away and connecting and then using all of our senses. That's the other reason why conferences, I think, in real life, I am hardcore in real life because we get to use all of our senses, whereas on a call, you're usually using two.
Staying on the topic, but diverting a little bit, right? You mentioned the meal, the in-person, the importance
Yep.
of that. Another, I think, concern that I'm hearing from friends on a supplier partner is that they do several invites to their events, whether it's happy hour or dinner or lunch, right?
Yep.
Even they have confirmations, at times even they have confirmations of, dozens of people are coming. And then when the event happens,
Yep.
super low attendance.
Yep.
Compared to the effort that they put into like send stuff out, even compared to the confirmations, like literally
Sure.
people that actually have confirmed. So what's the disconnect out there in your opinion?
I think it comes back to, so if we think bigger picture of why do people commit and then decommit to things in general in life? So I would say more at a higher level, and we can be very specific and drill in, is that we're asked to do a lot of things every day, every week, every year, every month. And we have to prioritize in our own lives what is the most important thing. And so one of the things I've learned, for instance, is that when you book something earlier in the morning, there's a much higher likelihood it's going to happen than later in the day. Rule number one. Okay.
What is that?
Why is that? So a couple of reasons. Number one, things tend to compound throughout the day, and then we reset every night when we go to sleep. So, it's the airplane rule. So if you think about airplanes, if you book a flight, and ask anyone who works in the airline industry, book the first flight of the day if you don't want to be late. If you want to be late, your probability of it goes up. I think it's like 4 times or 6 times. If you're the first flight, you're probably not going to be late, and something happens to the plane. Maintenance, weather, but not because it was delayed. It's already there. But at 6 p.m., now you've got potential compounding effects through airports throughout the country that could have hit your plane later in the day. Well, the same thing with business is if I have a call with you at 6 a.m., you're my first call of the day, I've got no blocker unless my kids need something or, they went to school at 8:30. My call at 9:30 has nothing to block it unless something more important comes along. But by 4 o'clock in the day, there may be fires coming, especially if I'm in an office or a large company. There could be a million things that have happened between 9 a.m. and 4 p.m. that I still have to get done during the day before I go home to my family or kids or something else. So that's why I think there's a challenge. I think, talking about events is there are so many things that can happen. Again, weather, school, family, why I might cancel a conference. But more importantly is, did you put in enough shots on goal? So I always say to people, whether it's meetings you want to do, if it's capital, if you're a founder who's raising $1 million, if you're a fund, that's when I know a lot of friends right now who are raising capital and haven't raised capital in 5 years because they haven't been buying deals. Now they're buying deals. Now I know people raising 10 million, 50 million, 100 million for real estate, multifamily deals and commercial deals. The challenge right now in this environment, people think there's less money. That's a common misconception, that there's less money and there's less people out there in the world. And both of those are factually incorrect. There are more people than there have ever been. There's more investors and there's more capital than there's ever been by at least 20 to 25% just over the last 5 years, which is insane. The problem for most people that they don't want to hear is it's going to different places. So you're seeing super funds like A16Z raising all-time highs. So you're seeing more real estate funds raising and having more capital AUM, assets under management, than ever before. So that's the mistake of most people. They don't want to hear the truth. What we talked about is that the truth is there's more people attending many times and more buyers at many of these conferences, at many of these in real life experiences, but their access is not the same. So opportunity is unlimited, but access is not. And so that's something I think about a lot is how do you get to the right people? And the right people have a flurry of deals. They have a flurry of places they can invest their capital. I get hit up every day by tens of people every day. And I don't need more places to put it. I need the right places. I need fewer spots to put it. And I think the mistake that many people don't realize about investing is It's not about investing into a spray and pray mentality. It's actually going deeper with more capital and then hitting, if you invest in 10 things, you're now going to say, wow, out of these 10 things, these 3 are doing great. I'm going to invest more capital there. And that's what you see with conferences. That's why you see conferences with mega booths, mega investment, mega teams. So sending 10, 40, 50 people rather than going to more conferences a lot of time. But again, it's different for each company.
Networking.
Yeah.
Share right here on a set some ways in which people could be more effective at networking. Reason why I ask you this particular question is that you're not only Mr. Proptech, but your collection of individuals and executive level individuals that you're meeting with on a daily, weekly, monthly basis is nothing short of impressive. I can't think of a single individual I personally know that has like this many active contacts in their network. What I'm saying active is like people that you actually meet and grab a coffee with, not just like a Rolodex, right? Just something that you've been accumulating, you've been piling on, like more connections and everything, and it's just kind of like static. It's just there, right? It's something that you're constantly nurturing, you're constantly going back to, and you're building those, you keep building on those relationships, like adding more bricks and adding like building more foundations out there. So what are some insights out there? How can people do better at networking in person?
So I think one of the most important things for people to think about networking isn't about accumulating names, accumulating acquaintances, et cetera. And I've seen this, I've probably been guilty of it in the past, is the mistake is going and trying to just hit a bunch of people. It's connecting with the right people. And so one of the things I think about is there's probably 3 buckets of people. Number one is mentors, right? Who can support you, you can learn from, who've been there before you, right? Number 2 are partners, people who you're partnering with, team and other people who you're working with. And number 3 are potential customers, right? Or partners and customers out there. And sometimes these 2 can go hand in hand. And even mentors, a lot of my mentors were customers and now we're very close friends. So I think a lot of times it's going and learning from others at an event. It's the same thing in sales. You're going to learn from your teammates or other people in the industry. But one of the fundamentals is who are those customers that are the people looking right now? And there's usually, I think there was a saying, like 5 to 10% of people are actively looking at buying your product right now. 5, 10%. You just don't know which 5 or 10% a lot of times. Now they may be coming onto your website. And I think one of the great things that people do is they do a good job of disqualifying. But the biggest mistake I've seen is people who disqualify based on assumptions versus disqualifying on the right questions. Did that person tell you the right information to properly disqualify them? Or are you going off of an assumption that you incorrectly made? And that's one of the biggest things I see teams do all the time, especially junior salespeople. And sadly, the CRM and the higher leaders are dependent upon lower level teams and what they say. I also will go back to the biases of when you're going to an event is that people love to do what's comfortable. People do not love or like trying new things. Oftentimes at a conference, the reason why I enjoy it is I've trained myself to like new things and new ways of doing things. So it's kind of like that startup mentality of technology is I no longer say, and I see plenty of people who do this, but I've learned greatly. I've had great people in my life who have been successful and said, that will never work. So one of the things I have is chips on my shoulder. This shoulder, if you look, this shoulder is about 2 inches higher than this one. It's because I have about 8,000 chips on the shoulder of people telling me I can't do stuff, right? And so I look for people who are challenging themselves, who've been told no, but then I look for those people who say no. This person's building something. I've seen 8 of those. This will never make it. Oh, interesting. They oftentimes won't even give that person the time of day. They won't even give them a meeting, won't even talk to them, or they'll have the meeting, but they are coming out with those questions that are like, oh, this is not going to work. Here's why. What about this? Well, what about that? Oh, you know what? This is a priority. Let me push it out. And that's actually good because you're getting at the real pain. And if you can get to the real pain of the problem, that's what I look for at events. I'm not trying to network. I'm trying to connect with people who are having problems, with people who are building incredible solutions to those challenges and those problems. And then the other connectors, right? And people who are the people who are really successful? What are they doing well? What are they doing different than the other? What are those top 1%ers? I always look for what are the 1%ers doing that the other 99% are missing? And they're usually not a lot, but they're getting certain things right. And by the way, it's oftentimes not what everyone else is getting right. Those are actually usually table stakes. It's the things that the other people are getting wrong. I learned this from the book Unreasonable Hospitality. In the book Unreasonable Hospitality, they talk about Michelin stars. How do you get Michelin stars? You don't focus on the things everyone else focuses on. Those are table stakes. Having a great setup, having great food, it's actually things that people don't pay attention to. Coffee, beer, tea, those are things that are secondary at Michelin rated restaurants until you spend the time and resources on it. And that's one of the key differentiators of those people if you read that book. So same thing at an event is I'm not there to sell products. I'm not there to sell people. I want to learn. I want to connect, and I want to find who are the smartest people in the room. And if I can do that at a conference and walk away saying, I met 5 incredibly smart people doing something that more people need to hear about and need to see, that's what I love to do. And I think something else, Adrian, is that I'm trying to look at companies out in the world and technologies and things that I want to see more of. I want to help them be successful. That's what I was doing when we were building Luxor and Laundry Lockers. I said, this is brilliant. How do we get this to so many more people who don't know about us? Because they don't know about Laundry. They don't know about Luxor. Now they do. People walk up to me all the time and show it to me. But how do we get those things into front of people's minds? So the things I live with and see in my life, I want to get that in front. And then I want to have the right conversations. So at conferences, I think too many people say, oh, I'm not going to spend my time on that. I'm going to go have a beer with my friend. Or I'm going to go have a lunch with my team. And there's nothing wrong with having a lunch with your team at a conference. But if you're there and that's not getting you closer to your goals, and that's not getting you to learning something about your clients and your partners and getting you to where you need to be going, I always say, is that the right time you're spending? So I see so many people at conferences who are spending their time and resources in safety and where they feel comfortable rather than going and doing the hard work. The hard work is where you see change. The AI companies right now scaling, and I have friends who are building businesses faster than I've ever seen before, some that are already $1 billion valuations. And those people are doing the hard work. They're not working 5 days a week. They're not going home at 4. They're working long days. They're working 7 days a week. And I'm not advocating for that. I'm just saying those are the people who are going to be changing the world, right? You don't change the world in 4 days a week and, working a couple of days.
Well, it's the same thing that I tell people when, they're asking me about content. And I'm going to shift to content in just a second.
Yeah.
How did you get to, we're talking earlier about, the 4 million views, impressions a year.
Yeah.
How do you get? So instead of giving them an answer, I ask them a question.
Yep.
How many people do you know that have a great body by working out, maybe once a week?
Yeah.
Great muscle, or not that they're not fit, because a lot of people are fit because they eat well.
Yeah.
But then muscle doesn't build that way. You have to work it, right? You have to break it. Or how many people do you know that advanced in their career and made a killing by working 2-3 days a week?
Yep.
And the answer is none, obviously, right? Always. Well, the same goes with content. The same goes with what you just said. Like doing the hard things, right? Doing the things that are against our default state, against our state of comfort, right? Looking for comfort. Look for what's uncomfortable for me. Being in front of people, meeting new people, trying to, asking for a meeting. All those things are not comfortable. They're hard asks, but then you have to be willing to do that, like you said. So with that, I want to shift to content and tell me about your journey with content in 2025. Just content in general, and also specifically to podcast content that you've been creating.
I think the first thing about content is, and educating people and asking the right questions is, why? What is your intent? My grandfather taught me a lot about like reputation. You know, I spent a lot of time with him, obviously my mom as well, but my grandfather, I got to spend just weeks at a time in Yosemite, and I hung out with all these senior citizens, which is awesome. But people in their 50s and 60s who were successful in life, and I was one of the few children there, and it was incredible to be brought up with them. Looking back now, because I was in these situations where you're learning about every day at the happy hour and hearing these stories about their businesses, and you had CEOs of banks and investors in real estate and developers and engineers and just incredible stories of people. And it was all about hard work, and then it was also about family. It was about, you know, spending time outdoors. You know, we're oftentimes in national parks. So when I think about content back then, the storytellers, great storytellers, are some of the most successful people because they understand the power of bringing together a message around a memory. And so whether it was sitting out, and I'll never forget, like looking at the lightning over the mountaintops and having like our cheese and charcuterie board with, you know, wine for the adults. And for me, it was apple cider, which I love. And hearing the stories about how they built bonds and how they met each other. And they met each other and on some trail, they met each other at a dinner, and then they invited, my grandfather was usually the person inviting someone to a future thing. And they would kind of laugh, oh yeah, huh. You know, yeah, maybe we'll meet up. And he was serious. And so that's how I think about it, is inviting people along for the road. And many people I invite don't show up. And so you stop inviting those people. Like, you're not going to waste your time inviting someone over and over and over again. There's people I invite to come on the podcast, or people I invite to a dinner or to grab coffee. And then if they can't make it, they'll say, actually, thanks for inviting me, but I can't make it, but I'd love to come to the next one. Please keep inviting me. And then they show up and they make it up, or they reciprocate and they say, you know what? I can't make it. I'd like to invite you to lunch or to coffee or dinner or something else. So that's what I look for, is that people who reciprocate or aren't just one-sided, but they're actually, you know, doing that. And then number two, so around the podcasting and the media, for me, it's learning the lessons. So what are the mistakes, you know, as we're talking about right now? Like, I've learned so many mistakes and I've made them myself. You know, how we became really successful. And I'll share a story of like getting awareness out at Laundry Locker in Luxor. Is we had a phenomenal storyteller in Melody Akhtari who helped us. And when I think about it, it was in a crowded field of people. How are you sharing your story and why you deserve to exist? Why the story gets deserving of being told? One of the things I think about is she told an interesting story around when we were launching a new product around refrigeration. You could just talk about the refrigerator and food or other things that go into it, but she took it a step further. And the step further was saying, at a conference, we're going to put flowers into a fridge. We're going to hand these flowers out to people. So it's not just like you open it up, but it was almost this crazy idea of opening a fridge to a rose. Why would I need a rose at a conference? Well, what the hell? Actually, this is pretty incredible. I love you giving me a rose, and I'm going to take this rose. And so it was one of the most memorable things we had ever done, was giving I'll never forget it. Was, you know, we did all these things that worked, but it was storytelling, and people remembered that story. So I think the same thing with media now, how I try to translate the things I've learned into storytelling, is when we have guests on, if I'm thinking about a CEO or a CMO, or, you know, we had Kate Good, and having fun with it. And Kate and Jamie Gorski is a good example. And I know she's coming back actually next month. Is how do we make it fun? How do we make it enjoyable? How do we help the person to talk about the things they want to talk about, or the things that they want to talk about that were actually very difficult moments? You know, we had Steve Halsey on once, and Steve Halsey was a great partner, great customer over the years, and a great mentor and friend. And he shared a horrible moment in his life about how his wife said they were done. And you can watch that video, and he's very open about it. And it is a life moment that is emotional, but nobody in the world could watch that and not walk away learning something, because he tells you the mistake he made of overworking and forgetting about his wife and his family and how he almost lost them. And everyone in life, whether you are married or have kids, at some point, you're going to have people that love you. And if you give up on those people closest to you, that is the single most important thing. So I think media, marketing, online presence, all these things come back to authenticity. Humans. With AI, I think a lot of people are creating AI slop, a lot of these things, and they might even be getting, likes and things like that. But what is your intent? If your intent is to sell something, great. And you sell something great. But for me, it's something deeper. It's actually a connection. It's connecting with people that actually learn from what I put out, number one. Number two, did I learn something or did I enjoy writing that? Because a lot of times when I'm writing for me. I'm writing for myself and maybe one other person. I just talked with some founders this week about their weekly updates. They write it for themselves. They write it for maybe the co-founders and their team. They're not actually writing it for the public yet. And then that content, what could happen from that potential? And one of the things I think that excites me is I've been told over and over by people, you'll see people post, LinkedIn's a place for business, not for families. That's Facebook, that's TikTok. Or I don't want to see this, I don't want to see that. But you know what? It is what you want it to be. And so the mistake that people make is that on social media, you get to have the voice you want to have. So if it's the holidays and you want to talk about depression, talk about depression. If you want to talk about health, talk about health. If you want to talk about business, great. But people who only talk about their business, that's where the issue actually evolves, is that people start to identify that person as just a salesperson selling and hawking their product. Well, me now, I'm fortunate, I'm an investor in multifamily. I'm an advisor. I'm involved in several funds as an LP. I'm on both sides of the aisle. So I no longer, I get to talk about what I want, and I'm fortunate I'm at that place, but I get to learn. And I think the greatest takeaway for me is that if one person who's told me, I love that you are a dad, and that when I post something about my kids and they're like, I love that, because they're no longer a dad themselves. And they go, you got to cherish those moments. So reminding yourself and bringing your kids into the business. And that's what I want to do. My end goal, number one, is pretty much, can I be a great dad and raise my kids in this world? That is the number one most important thing that I get out of today. Today, when we're done, and I close up my laptop and put my phone away, and I spend time with my kids for those 3 hours and then read them books, get them into sleep, that is the most important thing. Number one rule for 2026. Number two is my health. We only have so many years left. We get so many Christmases, so many Hanukkahs, so many summers, so many, first tooth falling outs in our lives. And so you got to cherish every one of those. And that will make us a better business person as well. So for me in business, the most important thing is finding great partners to do business with. And there's nothing better than in real life. There's nothing better than telling your story openly online and communicating that. And then when people come in to do that, we also get to spend time with them. And I love that. So those are some things I love. I think the other thing for me in 2026 is, doubling down in real life podcasts. I think I will experiment here and there with some of our online stuff, but I think, getting that out to the masses. So, LinkedIn and Facebook, maybe putting some of this out, but also I think there's so many people who haven't told their stories yet, and we need to do more of that by getting it online, but doing it in person. And then I think the meals, I love doing meals with people. So
Chris, it's been amazing having you on, my friend. As we wrap up this conversation, what is one thing that you wish we would have touched, we didn't have the opportunity to?
Yeah, I think for me, it's people that have impacted my life. So I hope to have that impact on others. So what I love is when I see other people and they say, Chris Moreno, I'll never forget, I had gone to an event and the person, when I walked up to the bar, he says, I want to meet one person. And I said, really? What are you looking to do? And this is just a group of people. And he's like, yeah, I just want to meet this guy, Chris Moreno. That was really impactful to me. And he worked at Greystar at the time. And it was Blueprint a few years ago. But that's when I had known I had created a presence online from Clubhouse. Built a group of about 75,000 people in real estate. And so I think the most important thing to me is, what is the impact I'm having? Is it a positive impact? Am I being kind? Am I paying it forward? And am I inspiring others to do the same? So I think one of the things that I take away from you is, helping other people overcome their fears and the things they don't want to do. Oftentimes we find the greatest success in the things we don't want to do. And sometimes it's just taking that first step. So like Sahil Bloom, if we think about Sahil Bloom and all the things he's doing and educating others people, I love that. Andrew Huberman, educating people on health and wellness. I think being a greater speaker too. I'm always looking to improve on that. Being open, but also sharing stories and then learning. And also about the fragility of and vulnerability of our mistakes. So I want to keep sharing those mistakes of, here's what we did one time, and that might actually be really good for your business because it was a mistake for us. Or this was really successful, but be careful. So I think the biggest thing for me now is I try not to give advice to people. I try to share my stories. And then you take with it what you can. This is what I did. This is my process. I'd love to hear your process. Maybe we can learn something from each other.
My friend, thank you for being with me in the studio today. Thank you for coming, for joining here in Atlanta. It's been great having you and great conversation always.
Yeah, I'm excited. It's going to be a big year to put in the work in 2026 and a lot of consistency.
Yeah,
that's it.
Looking forward to great things and a great partnership in 2026.
Thank you.